Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. Tonight we're going to spend a little time talking about ELRS Telemetry reuse on Rotorflight. And the reason we're going to do this video is because during the EdgeTX setup video, I had some issues with telemetry reuse, and I wanted to first sort out what those issues were, identify them, and then give you a readout on how to actually correctly use the ELRS telemetry reuse and explain what happens. So we're going to make this really quick and simple tonight. It's not going to be a long video, but I'm going to start out with a little bit of an explanation. On Express LRS, when you're using Express LRS and CRSF as your protocol, there are a limited number of sensors available. And in that limited number of sensors that are available, things like head speed are not one of them. So what the Rotorflight team did is they introduced this concept of a reuse. And a reuse is simply a command that we can put in the CLI of Rotorflight, and we can remap sensors that we do know about in CRSF to values that you might be interested in seeing on your radio in your telemetry sensor screen. So I have a link to this web page in the description, so you can come back and look at your leisure and read through it. But let's just cover a couple of the sensors that have been designated for reuse on Rotorflight as of the current version of Rotorflight, okay, which is May 30, 2024. So flight mode, the first one is flight mode. So flight mode, when you look on the radio, that is one of those sensors that it conveys. Of course, I don't see it. I think it's because I already did a remap on it. That's why. I have mine set for MCU. That's why. But flight mode, that talks about things like angle mode, attitude mode, horizon mode, those types of modes. So if you're not interested, like in my case, I only use the acro mode. That's it. I don't switch into any other modes on Rotorflight. So I don't use like the trainer mode or the horizon mode. I don't use any of those. So in that case, I might use flight mode for something else like my governor, my head speed, my throttle position, ESC temp, and so on. So if I wanted to, for example, use my flight mode sensor for something like governor, it'd be really simple just to type this command in the CLI. So we type set CRSF flight mode reuse equals, and then we type the parameter that we want to use. So I'm not going to go down the list and read every one, but the idea is the same all the way down this list. For example, you might want to use your attitude pitch. If you don't care about what the pitch is, if that's not meaningful to you, you could remap that to something like your ESC temp. And maybe if you live in a hot climate, you could set an alarm on ESC temp that says, hey, once my ESC gets above a certain point, then I don't want you to react anymore, or I want an alarm, right? You can use the sensor to get information, and notice that the allowed values are not consistent. They do change. So for example, in flight mode, you can either use none or governor or head speed, right? Those are the first three. And on pitch, you can use none or head speed, but see, governor is not listed. So you have to look and see which sensor allows for the value of the thing that you're trying to monitor, okay? And I'm going to show you how to change a couple of these. I'm also going to show you what went wrong in the full setup video yesterday. So we'll cover that as well. All right, so that's it for the page. That's it for the website. We're going to switch over to Rotorflight now and take a look at Rotorflight. And I'd like to show you a couple little tricks. The first one is that when you click in the CLI, this is one thing that threw me in the live stream. When you go in the CLI, watch what happens to the sensors over here on the left. Some of these sensors are going to turn red, and I'll get an audible prompt saying sensor lost, sensor lost. And the reason for that is because once you go into the CLI, it stops broadcasting certain telemetry features from the flight controller. So there they go. There go the sensors. See how those all turned red? During the live stream yesterday, that caught me off guard. Like, what happened? Why did that happen? And the reason it happened is simply because we went into the CLI. Another thing I want to say about the CLI, and this is where I made my mistake in the video yesterday, is I didn't type the word save. After I made my changes, I didn't save the changes. That was the root of the problem. So let's get into the reuse commands, and let me show you a couple of different things we can do on the radio. Right now, you can see I have it set for MCU and it's reading 15, although the sensor is not transmitting. So let me show you the first trick. Type the command get reuse in the CLI, and you'll get a list of the sensors that you have and the parameters that are allowed. And you'll notice this actually matches what's on the website. So you don't have to go to the website. You can get everything you need right here in the CLI just by typing the command get reuse and then hitting return. All right, so that's that. Now, right now, my first one, if you look right here on the top, and I realize this font may be kind of small. Unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do to change the font scaling on the video, so you'll just have to go along with me, maybe fire up Rotorflight on your own. But on this one, we see CRSF flight mode reuse equals MCU load. That's why this sensor right here says MCU. Okay, so I'm going to reset this. I've already set it to be MCU load. Now I'm going to show you how to change it. I'm just going to copy this text, highlight it. I'm going to right click and hit copy. I'm going to come down here and hit paste. And we need to put the word set in front of it. So set CRSF flight mode reuse equals, and I'm going to say none. And what that means is I'm no longer remapping. Now, after I say none, now the key is type the word save and hit enter. And when you do that, it reboots the controller. And then you'll see right here that says now disabled, okay? So that's no longer MCU. I'm gonna edit that label and I'm gonna change it to flight mode because that's now what is being represented. Now, I'll prove that to you by clicking on enable arming. And when I do that, and then I actually arm, I make sure my throttle is down. See how the flight mode says normal now? So that's your flight mode, okay? And again, I don't use any other flight mode, so that's the only one I can show you. That's the normal flight mode. Okay, so that's how you remap, and that's how you change a remap. So let's go back into the CLI. We'll type get reuse again, and let's do the one I was trying to do yesterday. Yesterday in the video, I was trying to do altitude. So I'm going to do, now the reason we do altitude, I talked to Rob and confirmed this with Rob. The reason we like altitude for our heads, oh, and see all the sensor lost? See, they all turn red. Don't let that freak you out. When you go into CLI, it stops transmitting these parameters. So don't let it freak you out. So I talked to Rob about the altitude reuse. And the reason we use altitude reuse is number one, it's a numeric field. And that's good for RPMs. We want it to be a numeric field. And number two, we don't have to fiddle around with things like ratios or offsets or any of that business. It's just a straight numeric field that we get. That's why on ELRS Telemetry reuse for RPM or head speed, altitude is a good one to use. So I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to hit copy, and then I'm going to type set, and then I'm going to paste that command in, and instead of none, I'm going to type in head speed. And notice I'm putting small letters in on purpose just to make a case. You don't have to put it in caps. Here's where I made the mistake in the video. I didn't hit save, so type the word save, hit enter, and then when we do that, after the reboot, you're going to see this one come up, and now we're, let's see, did it save? Come on, you're killing me. Get reuse. Altitude is equal to head speed. Oh, that's because I'm on flight mode. Let me scroll up, and we're going to find altitude. It's going to be up here. I have faith. It's going to be up here.
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
Oh, let me exit out of here. Oh, you know what? We may have to do discover new. Yeah, I'm not on discover new. That's what's going on. So we'll just hit discover new. And now that I've enabled that, there's my altitude. That's the one we were missing yesterday. Okay. So now in altitude, here's what we're going to do. We're going to edit that, and then we'll hit, I'll just change the label. I'm going to change this to RPM. And once I change that to RPM, we'll hit enter. And then we want to change the unit as well. That's the other thing that's nice about using altitude is that there are units here. So we can scroll down and change it to RPM. So now if you have telemetry, if you use a special function, for example, to play the value of that sensor, it will say the number followed by the phrase RPM. Okay, and now I can show you that it works. So I'm going to turn on arming, and we'll just enable that. And then I'm going to arm Express LRS, so that's enabled. And then I'm going to spool the helicopter up. It is actually connected to the helicopter with the blades off. So I'm going to spool that up, and we should see some RPM data come in right there. So you see the RPM data. Let me switch to the big camera so you can see it. there's the RPM data. And I'm at idle up 1 right now, which should be 2200 RPM when it settles in. And there we go. There's our 2200, very close, 2198. There's 2200. Now I'm going to lift the idle up into idle up 2, and that's 2400 RPM. And it'll climb here. There it is, 2398. And I guess it'll just stop there. There's 24. Okay, so there's our RPM sensor. And again, the problem yesterday was that in the CLI, I didn't hit save. And that's what you have to hit save. Also notice that when I remapped the altitude, other GPS sensors came in, including the GPS coordinates, the ground speed, the heading, and the number of satellites. If we go back into the CLI and we type get reuse, and you see that I've got my head speed set for altitude. If we go in here and we copy that, we'll just right click and hit copy, and I'm going to paste that in and type set. There's my sensor loss. So again, the sensor loss, and we're going to set this back to none. I'm going to bring the sensors up so you can see them again. So I'll hit none, and now I'm going to type the word save. Key to hit save. You got to type save and hit enter. Okay, that's a key. Then we'll delete all, and then I'm going to discover new. And when I discover new, you'll notice that none of that satellite business is in here anymore. It's all gone. And the reason it's gone is because we didn't use one of the satellite or GPS oriented sensors for a reuse. So because there's nothing to report, you don't get that telemetry sensor. That's why it's disappeared. Okay. I'm just going to, one more time, go back into the CLI. I'm going to hit up arrow a couple of times. And instead of reuse equals none, I'm going to type head speed again. In fact, you know what? Let's try something else. Let's just try a different thing. So you can see you don't have to set it to none first. So if you want to try something different, again, we have altitude reuse set to none. Let's set it to, let's try ESC temp. Let's just try that one. So I'll go back in the CLI and just hit up arrow a couple of times. And for the instead of none, I'll just type ESC_temp, hit return, type save, and hit return. And now back on the radio, when this comes up, you'll see those values come back in, and there's our altitude. You see how it says 35M? Now that's our ESC temp, and I guess that's in Celsius. So I'm going to click on this, hit edit. They're not using freedom units here, so we'll call this ESCT for temp, and then for units instead of M, we're going to look for Celsius. There we go. So now we have our ESC temperature right there. All right. So you don't have to do anything other than just type the command you want. So if I hit up arrow, and by the way, I'm recalling my previous commands by hitting up arrow on my keyboard. I realize you don't see that, but if you hit up arrow, you can recall previous commands. So I'm going to show get reuse, and you can see on my altitude, I've got ESC temp. We could also do back to where I started. We could do MCU load. So I'll hit up arrow again, and we'll do this. We'll set this to MCU_load. And when I do that, in fact, let's try something different just to switch it up a little bit. We'll do GPS heading reuse. How's that? So GPS heading reuse, and we'll set that to MCU load. Okay. So we'll leave our ESC temp intact. We'll set that to MCU load, type save. MCU load refers to the CPU. And we're going to look for heading right here, and it thinks it's in degrees. See how that's in degrees? We need to change that, and that's just going to be a percentage or a basic number. Oh, okay. There it is, unit. So we'll just set that to, do we have percentage as an option? We'll see. There it is, percentage. 1.5% is the MCU load. All right, so there you go. That's how to use ELRS telemetry reuse on Rotorflight. You don't have to keep setting it to none. You can simply overwrite past commands. Don't forget in the CLI, you can hit the up arrow. And when you hit that up arrow, you can get prior commands. Even, it looks like even over a reboot, as long as I keep Rotorflight active. So get reuse, that's a command you'll want to be familiar with. And then once you decide, there goes my sensor loss. See, this is what freaked me out in the video. Like, why did that all happen? They all turn red. That's very disturbing the first time that happens to you. But when you know what's going on, then it's not so much of a problem. But anyway, get reuse will show you any remappings you have. And then if you want to overwrite something, all you have to do is find that sensor and then just change the value. So instead of GPS heading reuse equals MCU load, we can set it to BEC voltage. Is that an option for this one, for heading? Oh, it's not. BEC voltage is not. But we could do it for a flight mode, right? We could do flight mode. Is that BEC voltage? Yeah, flight mode is there for BEC voltage. So let's do that. CRSF flight mode reuse equals BEC voltage. And then we type save and hit enter. And then we will see under flight mode, we'll see a voltage value. And don't forget, there it is. There's 8.18. You see that right there? Now we want to change that. We want to edit the label and just type, you can type whatever you want. You only get like 4 characters. So I'll type BEC voltage, BECV. And there is no unit measurement here. So you don't get to do volts or anything like that. So no option to change the unit on this one. And it's the reason for that is because the flight mode is an alphanumeric field. So it's not it's an alpha field, alphanumeric. So it's not associated with a number, which means you don't have units. That's why you don't have that drop down. But we can see that it's 8.18 volts. That's what it means. That's the 8.18 volts. Okay. There you go. That is the down and dirty. And I think with that information, you should be well equipped to do whatever ELRS telemetry reuse configurations you need for your setup. We showed a whole bunch of different options, how to change them, how to rewrite them, how to set them back to default values, all kinds of different options for telemetry reuse. I realize that that's not an ideal scenario. All I can say is that they are working on a refactor for telemetry that's out there. You know, that information is out there. So maybe when the refactor comes, some of these rules will change. But for now, the good news is we have something that's functional for key values that you want to see on Rotorflight. For me, the big one was RPM. That was the big one. All right. If you like this kind of content, make sure you smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know new videos hit the channel. That's all I've got for tonight. Take it easy and go fly something.